Tennessee is holding a special legislative session to look at a horrendous package of gun control bills. All of them are awful in their own ways. But there are also 2 red flag bills and 1 amendment that would throw HIPAA in the trash and create a registry not of gun owners or of guns, but of every person in the state on certain medications, and would require everyone on that list to sign a waiver forfeiting their Second Amendment rights. And seeing that the list of medications are all ones that I've dealt with professionally, I figure I'm just the person to tell you about it. Keep watching to see if your medications are on the list. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I've seen the headlines about Tennessee's governor caving to gun control, but I didn't realize it was this bad. There are a ton of new gun control bills making their way through Tennessee that would reduce your gun rights to levels typically reserved for blue state wastelands. But one of these bills is the absolute worst I have ever seen. And that's saying a lot. Before I get into the details, I want to thank today's sponsors. As always, Blackout Coffee Company is a huge supporter of the channel and the Second Amendment. They have all kinds of brews, including some that help two-way organizations fight for your rights directly. And huge shout out to the newest sponsor of the channel, Sonoran Desert Institute. SDI gives you the firearms education you need from the comfort of your own home. You'll cover gunsmithing, woodworking, armorer topics, and more with tools and materials shipped right to your door. Give them a call at 480-999-4767 or visit sdi.edu today. Now let's dive into this latest batch of tyranny. There are 9 bills on deck. There are, of course, 2 red flag bills. And then there's the red flag amendment banning gun owners from using a list of medications that everyone thinks only treat depression but are actually used for everything from fibromyalgia and migraines to the hot flashes and night sweats of menopause. I mean, I know us women can get a little crazy, but come on. And if you've been following this channel for a while, then you know that it just so happens that in my pre-baby life, I was a duly licensed psychotherapist with my own practice and practiced for over 10 years. Of course, as a disclaimer for those that don't know, while I do have to understand pharmacology, a therapist is not a psychiatrist and does not prescribe medications. I am not a medical doctor, and I did not hand out prescriptions. So that's enough about me and my background. Let's read this bill. So this bill would amend Tennessee Code and may be called the Safeguard Against Homicidal Side Effects Act. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation shall create on or before December 31st, 2023, a database containing the name, address, and date of birth of individuals who have filled a prescription of any of the substances listed in Section E within the last 6 months. Prior to prescribing a patient a substance listed in Section E, the prescribing healthcare professional shall inform the patient that filling such prescription will cause the patient to be barred from the purchase of a firearm for the duration of the treatment regimen for which the substance was prescribed or longer. 2 things, keyword there being or longer. Second, while psychotropic medications are designed to be taken on the short term, there are lots of doctors that just prescribe them forever. The prescribing healthcare professional shall provide the patient with a written disclosure form on a separate sheet of paper, stating in plain English in a print size not less than 18-point font that, by signing said document, the patient understands and agrees to be barred from the purchase of a firearm for at least the duration of the treatment regimen, and understands and agrees that information concerning the prescription will be shared with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and that the patient waives the patient's non-disclosure rights under HIPAA and other federal and state confidentiality laws for purposes of sharing information concerning the prescription with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. The disclosure form required by Subdivision B1 must be dated and have a separate signature line for the patient for each of the 2 waivers stated in Subdivisions B1A and B. A pharmacist shall not fill a prescription for a substance listed in subsection E without a receipt of a copy of a waiver form that meets the requirements of subsection B and is signed by the patient on both the signature lines required by subdivision B2. Upon receipt of a copy of a waiver form and filling a prescription for a substance listed in subsection E, the pharmacist shall record the date of the filling and the date of the last dose to be taken by the patient according to the prescribing healthcare professional's instructions. The pharmacist shall transmit each record made pursuant to this subsection C to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation shall only enter a person into the database created pursuant to subsection A upon receipt of a copy of a signed waiver form required under subsection B and receipt of a pharmacist's record under subsection C. The Bureau shall remove a person from the database within 30 days immediately following the passage of 6 months from the date of the patient's last dose to be taken, as indicated in the pharmacist's record required by subsection C. Next is the list of medications. Most of them are used for both depression and anxiety, but also have a list of other uses. 1. Citalopram, also known as Celexa, can treat OCD, panic attacks, anorexia, body dysmorphia, narcolepsy, and premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD, which is basically a hormonal depression tied to the menstrual cycle. It's also used for agoraphobia, which is basically an anxiety disorder where you're afraid to leave your house. Fluvoxamine, also known as Luvox, is prescribed mostly for OCD and anxiety. It can reduce the unwanted, intrusive thoughts of OCD. So for a cliche example, the recurrent thought that your hands are contaminated with germs and then the compulsion to wash them over and over and over again. Paroxetine, brand name Paxil, you see this one a lot with folks that have PTSD. I've actually worked with several veterans who were on it for exactly that reason. Other common uses are OCD, postpartum depression, fibromyalgia, which is an autoimmune disorder, they think, and PMDD. It's also been indicated for trichotillomania, which is an anxiety disorder in which people have a compulsion to pull out or twirl their hair until they have bald spots, and not going to lie, it wigs me out. No pun intended. Fluoxetine. This one is Prozac, the famous antidepressant. It's also been shown to reduce the binge and purge behaviors in bulimia. Like many antidepressants, it can also be used with other medications in order to control the extreme mood swings in bipolar disorder, mood swings which over time can actually damage the brain if left untreated. Sertraline, this one is Zoloft and is honestly pretty mild as far as antidepressants go. And I had a lot of clients with OCD that did great with Zoloft, as for some reason it really reduces those obsessions. Those are those intrusive thoughts about the contamination, or did I lock the door, or whatever the person's obsession is. Venlafaxine, or Effexor, also used to treat nerve pain, particularly in diabetics with neuropathy, which is when your nerves become damaged and start dying. It's also used for fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, ADHD, though I haven't seen that one personally. It's also used for the hot flashes and night sweats common in postmenopausal women. It also somehow works for people for migraine prevention. Mirtazapine. This one is Remeron. This is an atypical antidepressant and is definitely more serious than everything we've seen so far. It's a tetracyclic, which is a class of medications that prescribers typically only look at if every other class of medications for depression has failed. But it's also used to treat insomnia, pretty commonly actually, as well as anxiety and migraines. Number 8 is Nefazodone. This medication isn't even on the market anymore, so I don't know why it's on this list. The FDA discontinued it in 2003 because it was causing liver damage. Number 9, bupropion. This is Wellbutrin, and it was first created to help people stop smoking. It's also used in alcoholics to help them stop drinking, and is used for seasonal depression. And finally, escitalopram, also known as Lexapro, usually prescribed for anxiety. Now I know there has been a connection between mass shooters and psychotropic medications, but I do not think, in my years of experience and professional opinion that it's the medications causing that behavior. Those people are obviously violent, mentally ill, and just about every single one of them had a history of violence. While I'm not a big proponent of psychotropics and think that therapy will take you way farther than a medical band-aid, which is what a lot of these are, we have to admit that just like guns, millions of people are on these medications and don't hurt anyone every single day. What's more is dosage matters. Different doses do different things. This bill doesn't differentiate between someone who is on Effexor because of diabetic neuropathy or someone who's on it for depression, nor does it differentiate between someone on Paxil or Celexa for fibromyalgia versus someone on them for anxiety. And there's plenty of other medications out there in the world, like clonidine, for example, which is a blood pressure medication that just happens to have psychotropic effects. None of these medications on this list are antipsychotics, which treat things arguably way more serious than depression and anxiety. They also don't include any of the mood stabilizers used to treat bipolar disorder. These medications honestly treat the vanilla of mental health issues. All this bill would do is stop people from seeking treatment for mental health issues, which will overall hurt people way more. And there's always this talk about veteran suicide. We need to prevent veteran suicide by encouraging them not to get help and not take their medications. Now, I know it doesn't have much of a chance of passing because, look at it. But that's almost irrelevant. What matters is that it was introduced in the first place. Remember way back a few years ago when New York wanted to do social media background checks for guns? I did a video on that and everyone said, oh, it'll never happen. And sure, it didn't pass then, but it did later. And remember those states that wanted mental health background checks for gun licenses? Those didn't pass at the time either, but now we have good moral character clauses and red flag laws that anyone can abuse, and you have to get character references in interviews to get a gun license in some states. The fact that anyone thought that this amendment was a good idea and put it into writing is the problem. And you know what? Because so much of the mental health community is a bunch of woke anti-gun lefty-loos, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them latched onto this as a good idea. Not because they think that their patients with depression or anxiety are violent, but just because they're that anti-gun. Your average person with anxiety or anorexia or depression or whatever isn't a violent criminal, and people going through mental health issues, whether chronic or temporary, shouldn't be marked as second-class citizens unworthy of privacy or personal protection because they chose steps to get better. Those are basic rights. And if you're against a registry for guns, you should be against a registry of law-abiding citizens. If you're not, well, maybe you should get that checked by a professional. That is it for my rant on this topic today. Thanks guys for tuning in and sticking around to the end of this video. Thank you for all of today's sponsors. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are new here, and happy shooting.